Good morning. This is Crystal Woods with Seasons in the Vine, and it's Fresh Friday. And I'm really glad to be here with you. I hope you're enjoying this study of Nehemiah, and each week you're getting whatever the Lord wants for you to get from His Word. His Word is living and active, and the history that we see in Nehemiah not only reveals what it looks like to be a leader, because Nehemiah is in his own class as a leader. Like, he is a man that prays a lot, stands firm against very serious enemy attack, and he is diligent in the call and purpose on his life. But not only do we get to survey that, but we just get to see how God keeps them. How Nehemiah just continues to put his trust in the Lord, and God keeps them, and this work is accomplished. So cool. So let's get right into it. Nehemiah 4. We'll get about halfway through this chapter, I think, based on about how long it's been taking us, but we'll see how the Lord leads and what our timing looks like. So one of the questions I have actually in my Bible, kind of written up there at the top, is why aren't you busy with the work of the Lord? That's something to really pay attention to, because what we see here is the enemy is back. And this enemy is going to bother them for a while. And so the enemy is back with more tactics, and we're going to talk about some enemy tactics today, because he's not creative, he's not creator. Therefore, he uses the same things over and over and over again because they work. They can work very often. He's not really drumming up anything new because he doesn't have to. And he uses the same things over and over again. Now, it doesn't throw Nehemiah off, because Nehemiah is very grounded in who the Lord is. And we're going to look at that and how to pull that out. But the question that I have in my Bible, which is the first thing you could say when someone is attacking you or the enemy is after you, we know why he wouldn't, but why would a person be working with the enemy against you? Like, why would that be happening? Or maybe you've participated with going after somebody else before, and you kind of remember that. If you're busy with the work of the Lord and what he has for you, you really won't have a lot of time to be worried about what anybody else is doing, because you're busy with doing the call on your life. So this question of why aren't you busy with the work of the Lord? Everybody else is busy in this story, but the enemy, they're just causing havoc. And they're just causing doubt and question and ridicule and confusion. And we're going to see that play out. Verse 1, chapter 4. Now, when Sanballat heard they were building the wall, he was angry and greatly enraged. And he jeered at the Jews. And he said in the presence of his brothers and the army of Samaria, "What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore it for themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they finish up in a day? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of rubbish and burned ones at that?" Tobiah the Ammonite was beside him, and he said, "Yes, what they are building, if a fox goes up on it, he would break down their stone wall." All right, so let's take a look, because now we're seeing the enemy at work. He's back on the scene. He's angry that Nehemiah is doing God's work. He's angry that Nehemiah is rebuilding where there has only been ruins. And so we have Sanballat, we have and Tobiah here, the Ammonite, and there's other people around, but these two are together, and they're doing what? They're accusing. They're casting doubt. All right? And what we see very specifically is that they are ridiculing, they're jeering. And what are they really saying? What are these feeble Jews doing? So first, they're calling them weak. Will they restore it for themselves? So that actually is a really hard phrase to break down in Hebrew, and there's some debate about what it really means. But what we can bottom line decide is, like, they're probably saying, like, are they even able to do it themselves? Will they need God's help for it? Is God working with them? That's another idea behind that. But will they restore it themselves? Will they sacrifice? So when it's time to sacrifice, like, that was really common when you were doing a new work, was to make a sacrifice unto the Lord, that consecration piece. We talked about that. And so are they going to do that? Will they finish up in a day? Are they actually going to be able to even finish it? So imagine hearing this when you're doing a really hard work, you're in a tough place, and then you're being ridiculed and you're being accused accused of being weak and unable to finish the project? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of rubbish and burned ones at that? Okay, that's a very interesting thing to say. This is why culture is really important. So ancient Near East culture really looked down upon using burned stones to build something new. They were considered cursed. Now, we're not saying that the Jews believed that necessarily, but the surrounding area and people would have. So are they saying that because they're going to use cursed stones to build this wall? That's kind of crazy. And what happens is, what we see is that this isn't a time where they can actually go quarry new stones. This is happening really quick. The wall, it gets completed really fast. So they're not digging new stones. So they are going to be using what is already there for the wall, and they're going to use those stones that are burned and charred from the breaking down of that to rebuild. That's why the context is important, though, because now you kind of understand what they were saying. Basically, they're going to be using cursed stones to rebuild the wall. Not really. Tobiah the Ammonite was beside him, and then he picks on them. He's jeering, he's accusing that what you're building isn't even strong enough for a tiny little fox who doesn't weigh very much to get on top of it and it'll crumble. Okay, so they're just kind of hearing this stuff. Not cool. Now, what does Nehemiah do? Oh, he goes right into prayer. He prays 7 little prayers during this book. During this time in history, we have documented 7 little prayers. He has 2 really long ones, one in chapter 1, and then one in chapter 9, I believe. But these are these small little ones that he shoots up right away. As soon as the attack comes, as soon as there's something to process, he goes right to the Lord. Hear, O our God, for we are despised. So he's calling out to the Lord, turn back their taunt on their own heads and give them up to be plundered in a land where they are captives. That's a pretty serious prayer. Some people debate whether you can even pray that way because Jesus says to pray for your enemies. And so what I see Nehemiah doing is like basically whatever they're trying to dish out, return to sender. Like whatever you're trying to curse me with, I'm going to be blessed instead because we're going to break that off. And like you keep your curses to yourself. Return to sender. Go back. And you would really just want to trust the Lord with prayers like that and really just pray that his will would be done over those situations because we want to honor the teaching of Jesus, obviously. This is a different covenant. This is a different time. But we do see Nehemiah going right to the Lord with that. Like, can you take these people back with like wherever they need to go to be plundered and be taken captive, and their taunts are back on their own heads. Do not cover their guilt and let their sin be blotted out from your sight, for they have provoked you to anger in the presence of the builders. Now, this is what's interesting. He is saying that God has been provoked into anger. God has been provoked into anger. So Nehemiah is actually praying in accordance to the Lord's displeasure. That's kind of cool. That's really interesting. And I think that's something that you could go into and seek the Lord about. Like, what is your purpose here? What would you desire to happen to these enemies? Obviously, the Lord wants everyone to come into repentance. And what is that going to take? For the Jews, it took them being made captive and being plundered. Maybe that's what needs to happen to these people. Only the Lord knows. So we're going to give it back to him. Verse 6, so we built the wall, and all the wall was joined together to half its height. So we're about halfway through the project, for the people had a mind to work. So the enemy's not working. The enemy's watching and jeering and ridiculing. But the people they're staying to the task. They're staying to work, and they are getting a lot done. Verse 7, but when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites heard that they were repairing the walls of Jerusalem and was going forward, and that the breaches were beginning to be closed, they were very angry. And so they are surveying what is happening. They're not, this first threat, this jeering and all that isn't throwing the workers off. So they're going to up their game. And we can see that, like the threats will continue possibly. And they plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause confusion in it. And we prayed to our God and set a guard as a protection against them day and night. Okay, this is huge. So they plotted together to come and fight. So now they're going to rally armies and they're going to threaten them with bodily harm. Like they're going to be trying to take them out. Wow, that's a real threat. Like this is serious at this point. And what do we see here? One of the main enemy tactics, confusion. He loves to cause confusion. Did God really say? Well, now I'm confused. Now I'm trying to think about what God really said. No. He will try to cause you to doubt what you know to be true about yourself, what you know to be true about others, what you know to be true about God. Because he is the author of confusion. If God is not the author of confusion, then we know confusion never comes from God. And therefore, it is coming from the enemy. Common tactic. So we have an accusation, jeering and ridicule, and now we have confusion. And confusion is a main tactic of the enemy. He wants you to begin to question everything because what happens? Your sound mind begins to diminish as you are confused. And what you thought was what you thought becomes jumbled and it gets out of whack and you lose your footing. Now, what do Nehemiah and the rest do? Oh, verse 9, and we prayed to our God and set a guard as a protection against them day and night. Nehemiah takes it seriously. This is a serious threat. So we need a guard. We're going to pray first, and then we're going to set a guard. In Judah, it was said, verse 10, the strength of those who bear the burdens is failing. There is too much rubble. By ourselves, we're not able to repair the wall. So the people are beginning to get exhausted. This is wearing on them. There's a threat against their lives. They're getting ridiculed, and it seems like a huge task. Verse 11, and our enemies said, they will not know or see till we come upon them and kill them and stop the work. So the enemy is surveying. They're in a weak place. We're going to come. They're not even going to know we're coming. Verse 12, at that time, the Jews who lived near them came from all directions and said to us 10 times, you must return to us. So in the lowest parts of the space behind the wall, in open spaces, I stationed the people by their clans with their swords, their spears, and their bows. What does Nehemiah do? He gets ready for the attack. Okay, it gets better. And I looked and arose and said to the nobles and to the officials and to the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers and your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. Wow. Okay, so huge. They deal with the attack coming head on. We need protection. And Nehemiah debunks the confusion because he reminds them of who the Lord is. Remember the Lord. They're threatening you. They look scary. I mean, this is a lot of armies against them now at this point. This looks really bad, but we are doing the Lord's work. So we do not need to be afraid of what the enemy will do or try to do, because we have the permission, favor, and blessing of the Lord for this work. He is our defender. Vengeance is his. So he's the one that's going to have to get us out of this. And what are we going to do? We're going to be wise. We're going to post guards. We're going to be ready to fight. And we're going to dwell and think on who our God is. And we're not going to give way to confusion and fear. That's huge, because we see that. They're like, hey, you got to come back. There's a lot going on here. We need to be fortified. We need people. And Nehemiah handles it. And it's amazing to see how the confusion dissipates when they focus on God. So one of the biggest things you can do, that's how far we're going to get today, but one of the biggest things you can do to break confusion is to look at the character of God. Remember who he is. Study his attributes. He is good. He's all-knowing. He's all-powerful. He's everywhere at all times. He's kind, he's gracious, he's holy, he's the judge. We think upon the Lord and his kindness. We see the history of it, and then we settle ourselves down and brace for the attack. But our eyes are not on what the enemy is trying to scheme up. Our eyes are not on the confusion. They're on the Lord and who he is. And that keeps our mind, the mind of Christ. that keeps our minds steadfast. He will keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on him. So as your mind is focusing on the Lord, you'll have perfect peace. So think about that today. Think about what we learned about enemy tactics and focusing on God and his character and what he has said above the enemy schemes and the confusion, the fear, the jeering, and the ridicule and the accusation. I'll see you next week. This was good.